The Shonakon experiment took place after elections. The interim government of 1993 was set in place as an illegal substitute to the people's mandate as expressed through election results. Conversely, the currently proposed transitional government is to be established before elections on constitutional foundations to help steer the shape of state to a harbor suitable for elections. That's the difference for those who can think. It is noteworthy that in an aforementioned article, the author states anything that tampers with the people's mandate is a coup against the Constitution and the popular will. Whereas such post-election tampering with a mandate was exactly what happened in 1933, I am proposing a reasonable way to avert post-election turbulence that could threaten our very existence as a nation. Ground 2. Jonathan's incompetence and proposed leadership of a transitional government. That's the argument that was everywhere. That, hey, are you going to dash him another 2 years? This man who had done nothing for 5 years? It has been widely argued that President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan has, in the 5 years of his presidency, thus far proved incompetent at leading the Nigerian nation out of its myriad challenges and would therefore be unfit to lead a transitional government even if such were created. Though acknowledging that the proposal for a non-partisan coalition of competent, that's what the author of that write-up in The Nation wrote, acknowledging that the proposal for a non-partisan coalition of competent statement is intended to lend capacity to an otherwise weak government, analysts have expressed doubt as to Jonathan's ability to provide the needed leadership for such a coalition. However, I would like to remind you that even Pharaoh, the seemingly all-powerful Egyptian king, could not interpret his own dreams, and neither did Joseph to manage alternating seasons of economic prosperity and austerity, thereby preserving not just a nation, but nations in the then known world. Need I also remind you that even the great Nebuchadnezzar was helpless in understanding the unfolding political realities in his own kingdom. He did not even remember his own dreams, and yet was looking for interpretation for it. He needed a Daniel and his company to administer that kingdom with such an excellent spirit that was attributable only to divinity. Perhaps I need to remind you that though Abraham Lincoln is known today as the greatest American president, he was at the beginning regarded by many in the political class as incapable of governance. He eventually succeeded, not so much because of his competence, but because of his genius at forming a coalition that brought together arguably more competent person than he was in certain respects, a team that included his most bitter rivals. Beyond this argument, I would like to emphasize that trustful give and take are the requisite dispositions for bridging gaps across political divides, balancing volatile competing interests, and bringing diverse subnational entities within an integrated national framework. In essence, given the bellicose political climate in our nation, with looming inter-ethnic tensions, the proposal for a Jonathan-led coalition as a transitional arrangement is a political solution rather than a policy or management one. The kind of that power-sharing provisional governments are made of. The aversion to this approach across the political climate is understandable. As I pointed out earlier, such arrangements are usually post-conflict structures intended to stabilize a conflict-ridden polity. However, in the Nigerian case, because the south wind is blowing softly and the entire nation is not yet engulfed in the storm, we see no need to deploy such measures preemptively. Instead, led by politicians, some of whom are hungry for power and blind to the warning signs, while others sincerely, genuinely compelled to start a ship of state to a desired end, choose to ignore or downplay the risk, we are operating from sight rather than foresight. When the storm is over, we might find ourselves reviewing events with hindsight. Mark my words. Ground number 3, undue tenure elongation. If we take Nigeria's realities into consideration, we will understand that the proposal for a transitional government has nothing to do with any elongation agenda of the present government. If indeed the government is nothing such. It's an expedient measure to stabilize and rebuild the foundations of a tottering nation. And any attempt to hijack the process for tenure elongation should be resisted, if it ever happens, by civil society organizations and all men of goodwill, as was done during the fuel subsidy saga, forcing the president to step down from the high horse of price hikes. Ground number 4, the political quagmire and the need for political solution is limited to the Boko Haram crisis. I've observed that several of the responses to my proposals stem from a narrow assessment of the tensions in our nation. I mentioned 7 grounds in that broadcast. They only saw one. When I read statements such as those credited to the Northeast governors who said if elections could hold in troubled countries like Iraq, then the Northeast shouldn't be an exception, as reported in the leadership newspaper on January 6, 2015. I see that the stakeholders are failing to take a holistic look at the Nigerian socio-political climate with a view to assessing the balance of tensions across sections of the country, tensions that could snowball into civil conflict if the fundamental causes are not addressed before power is authoritatively allocated or reallocated. Ground number 5, parallels with conflict-ridden countries in which elections were held. Example, Iraq, and I want to help them add Afghanistan and Pakistan. The Northeast governors who have either failed to secure their states and have been largely helpless before Boko Haram, even with the help of federal government, and who ought to be the most vociferous advocates for fundamental changes, have compared the Nigerian situation to the cases of Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, arguing that the fact that elections have been held in these climes, in spite of their volatility, is a proof that elections can be held in Nigeria. However, these governors have failed, and those listening to them, they have failed to take certain facts into consideration. There's only one thing you can do with truth. Use it. Let's bring the facts out. Fact A. Elections were constitutionally due in Iraq in 2003, but were initially cancelled and postponed until 2005. The purpose of the 2005 elections in Iraq was to create a constituent assembly for the drafting of a new constitution. That's after it was postponed. And then they had the election. Even then, the Northeast governors ignored the fact that Iraq eventually failed to address the fundamentals before going to presidential elections. The resultant government, headed by Nouri al-Maliki, formed a non-inclusive Shia-dominated government, thereby allowing feelings of exclusion to fester among the Sunnis. This sectional discontent has placed Iraq at the mercy of a Sunni-dominated rebel group that you and I now call the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL. Also, the Kurds have taken advantage of the situation to gain greater autonomy. As a result, Iraq is in disarray. Is that the kind of nation the Northeast governors should be using as a reference point for Nigeria? B. While referring to Afghanistan, the Northeast governors ignore the fact that following the American invasion, a transitional government was appointed in 2001 and presidential elections were put on hold under the 2001 arrangement until 2004, after the constitution was adopted by the Afghan people by consensus. Human memory is very fickle. Afghanistan has tottered all along with security challenges, violence, vote stuffing, and other vices in elections that have been managed by the United Nations. In 2014, elections were so heavily disputed that the country is now governed under a power-sharing arrangement which ought to be unconstitutional, but is politically expedient to avert a vacuum in government and chaos in that country because they realize that a constitution that will not bend will break. The best Yoruba proverb I find for such arrangement after the crisis had happened and then we now start putting things together is Akeyin rogmo aketi aja ake letitan infabe pamo. A dog that should have kept the knife that they were going to use to cut his ear left the knife alone, and after they have cut the ear, he now look for the knife to go and keep. He's putting the cart before the horse. 3 or C. The governors also ignore the fact that there is a fundamental difference between the socio-political environment of Pakistan and that of Nigeria, despite the existence of terror groups in both. What's the difference? As was earlier mentioned, the Nigerian case is a conglomeration of agitations and discontentment of a structural and constitutional nature. Pakistan, on the other hand, arrived at consensual constitutionality in 1973 under the government of Ali Bhutto, with input from opposition parties and ratification by the parliament. This has been the basis of the Pakistani government since then, even though amendments have subsequently been made. The constitution was suspended during military coups, but was restored with the exit of the military. The draconian amendments to the constitution by the military were subsequently repealed. The Pakistani constitution is a Pakistani social contract and has survived not just military interregnum, but the emergence of the Taliban terror group since 2001. By resisting the state, the Taliban is resisting the people's document. Indeed, the Pakistani Taliban only emerged in protest against the support given by the Pakistani government to the US-led coalition forces that invaded Afghanistan. Nigeria, on the other hand, does not have such a foundational social contract. The 1999 Constitution is full of fundamental structural flaws which are the basis of sectional agitations and dissonance from the Nigerian state. Agitations that assume regional, ethnic, and religious proportions. The 1999 Constitution cannot stand the test of time, and mere amendments without addressing those structural flaws and without the assent of the people will amount to repairing the roof of a dilapidated building that has serious foundational and structural problems. The word of the Lord Jesus comes to mind here in Luke chapter 6, verse 46 to 49. If you are just window dressing and paper walling a crack, or fixing the roof without fixing the fundamental structural problems and foundational problems, hear what Jesus said in Luke 6, 46 to 49. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things which I say? Whoever comes to me and hears my saying and does them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house, who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose and the stream beat vehemently against that house, he could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But he who heard and did nothing, just as you are hearing now, Nigeria, he who heard and did nothing is like a man who built a house on the earth. Human philosophies and ideas that will not stand the test of time. Without a foundation, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately it fell. And the ruin of that house was great. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to address fundamental issues that have been referred to as the Nigerian question, which include a plethora of sub-questions, such as the Niger Delta question, the Middle Belt question, which together with many other agitations constitute the minority question. These must be addressed while also addressing the northern question, the Yoruba question, the southeastern question, and so on and so on. Many questions begging for answers. Ground number 6. The 2014 National Conference was a diversionary tactic, and its implementation cannot be the rationale for a transnational government. Considering the fact that 2014 National Conference was a platform to address the questions that are subsumed in the Nigerian question, it's unfortunate that politicians who are part of the conference are showing no commitment to its report. A report that may turn out to be a lifesaver for the Nigerian nation. I'm compelled to ask if those politicians were at the conference as time wasters, with a view to collecting the allowances as their own share of the national cake. In spite of the alleged diversionary interests of the government, the findings of that conference offered Nigerians a robust blueprint for development at this critical juncture. Ground number 7, that the proposals that we made are unconstitutional. I understand on radio many constitutional lawyers were cheering at the report. Nobody has monopoly of wisdom. We study constitutional law too. First of all, I showed clearly in my earlier speech how the constitutional war powers of the president may be activated by taking into consideration the fact that the war against insurgency is a war involving the territory of the Nigerian state. I would like to remind you that since that broadcast, it made the news that a military base previously controlled by the multinational joint task force in Bakare, Borno State, was attacked and dislodged by Boko Haram. If that is not war, let the government and the politicians tell Nigerians what it is. I further showed that in the provisions of Section 135, the framers of the Constitution would have been seeking to forestall the kind of catastrophe that could result from the volatile political environment and the fundamental flaws which elections are likely to aggravate are not addressed. I will state, however, that it will fail to find within the Constitution a lifeboat out of the sinking ship, just like we did with the doctrine of necessity. Then we must be reminded that the Constitution that will not bend will break, and that no nation, no matter how enlightened, can endure criminal violence. If we cannot control it, we are admitting to the world and to ourselves that our laws are no more than a facade that crumbles when the winds of crisis rise. If you want people to respect the law, you must make your law respectable. Final ground number 8, prophetic antecedents and consistency. Just making as a matter of fact, laying it bare, the track records of this ministry. If I have any concerns today, It is the fact that we are a rebellious nation led by self-willed leaders who pay lip service to God when it is convenient and who consistently resist his timely warnings, thereby paving the way for avoidable blows. For example, in 1993, we won. SDP we fail. NRC will lose, be cut off and swallowed up. The military will fall. Verdict 93, our God reigns. I remember today with pain the solo lamentation while I was preaching. Are there no elders in MKO Abiola's house to warn him that he's embarking on a journey of no return? I ask you the question now, where did it all end? I give you a second example. During the Abacha era, after he had taken over power from IBB's interim contraption led by Shoneko, 3 timely warnings came, first in Kano and twice in Lagos. In Kano, we said during the gathering under the auspices of the Conference of Prophetic and Apostolic Churches, COPAC, loud and clear in the open, Murtala Mohammed will not be the only head of state from Kano that will return home dead. This present one is coming home dead too. Did Abacha escape that prophecy? Second one, under Abacha, after General Diaz's alleged coup, a word came from heaven. When the killer wants to kill, the killer shall be killed. Expect the night before miracle. Did it not happen? Example number 3 under Abacha. And last but not the least, the prophetic message delivered during one of our communion services. The tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Abacha, your time is up. Did he survive it? Let's come close to the present democratic experience from 1999. On March 7, 1999, in the course of the message titled No More Walls, we proclaim, rejoice not yet, O land, or your joy will be temporary. I'm bringing your judges, your princes, your prophets, your priests, your rulers, and your governors to my threshing floor. And after I've threshed them, I will restore to you a permanent joy. Obasanjo is not your Messiah. He is King Agag. And the prophetic axe is coming upon his head before May 29. In hindsight, how would you appraise the messianic intervention of Obasanjo in our ailing democracy? Under the same Obasanjo, just before he was sworn in, subsequently in the message titled Nigeria, a nation given over to lying propaganda, we declared, if by an act of omission or commission, Obasanjo is sworn in as president of Nigeria, 3 things will happen. Number 1, corruption will reach its peak. Number 2, the revival of the Okada will claim many lives. And number 3, family life will disintegrate in Nigeria. Be the judge of these prophetic declarations. Here we go again as a nation, not listening or heeding prophetic warnings to slow down a bit and put our heads together so as to put our right foot forward. I can understand why some have concluded that ongoing campaigns signal a wind of change. Some said a lot of money had been invested. What do we do to it? You go to Jonah's ship. In Jonah chapter 2, they use their hands to throw their own cargo into the sea. Go into the Alexandrian ship, boarded by Paul. He warned them that disaster is in the offing. They ignored. They used their hands twice to throw everything into the sea again. Some have concluded that ongoing campaigns signal a wind of change. The campaigns have been very colorful. I didn't experience such. I didn't have to change garments from city to city. I didn't experience such. These have been very colorful, energetic, and continue to gain momentum day by day. But with the February 2014 election usher in the new Nigeria of our dreams, if the fundamental issues are not first addressed? Are we not putting the cart before the horse once again? These are questions begging for answers. I sincerely pray that our leaders will pause, think, and act in divine wisdom, available to those who truly seek God's guidance and His timely intervention in our present situation. This is the only way we can avert disasters, such as that which befell Prophet Jonah, who later learned the hard way and confessed in the belly of the fish. Those who observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. When I saw the front page picture today in Punch of Obasanjo bowing to Jonathan and shaking his hands, I think he just woke up and realized the man has raw power and he could turn the tide against him. There will be several ambushments before we hit February. Those who observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. As I end this speech, let me reiterate that the modalities of a win-win transitional government are available and will be published when you need it, Nigeria. For now, here is a call of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 20 to 33. Proverbs chapter 1, 20 to 33. I read it at the beginning of this year, January the 1st. I'm reading it again. From verse 20 it reads, and I quote, "Wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open squares. She cries out in the chief concourses. At the openings of the gates in the city, she speaks her words. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. Because I have called and you refused. I've stretched out my hand and no one regarded. Because you disdained all my counsel and will have none of my rebuke. I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm, and your destruction comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you. Then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel and despise my every rebuke. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their own way and be filled to the full with their own fancies. For the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. My sincere prayer is that we listen to timely warnings, dwell safely within our nation, and be secure without fear of evil in Jesus' mighty name. Thank you for listening. God bless you. God bless Nigeria. Stand to your feet and let us pray.